What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're back with some Destiny 2 updates and news. And we're going to talk about fixes for very powerful builds in the game as Bungie update abilities. They also clarify issues with certain abilities in the game as well as reward drops, dungeon exotic rarity, and more. Then additionally we have first sight on some future content and projects Bungie are developing for Destiny, as well as conversation about returning exotics and more to touch on in the video. Before we get going though, if you guys want to save 10% on GamerSupps orders, be sure to use code Houndish and follow the link down below to get some awesome drinks which improve alertness while gaming without excessive sugar and additives. They've got some really tasty stuff, so details for that are in the description box below. Now though, let's get into the video content, and one of the things folks are talking about initially this week is the seasonal story progression. The Sever mission this week was slightly more interesting as it is a bit different to the last couple of weeks, but the story itself has been the most impressive part. We got lots of dialogue as well as a cutscene showing Zavala's backstory and family. Pretty emotional one this week, and I did upload that separately, so I'll link the story segment below, but give us any thoughts you have in the comments section. And here we get onto some more important gameplay updates from Bungie, and following the patch that we had yesterday, players noticed that throwing hammers and roaring flames weren't doing anywhere near as much damage as they were doing at the start of the season, and DMG said, when Season of the Haunted shipped, we had a patch note explaining that damage boosts from some exotics would be reduced with roaring flames. And it turns out that damage wasn't being reduced at all, and so it was addressed in the hotfix that we had yesterday. And looking back to the way that was intended to work, they'd said that Roaring Flames now activates from solar ability kills and kills with solar ignitions, but the damage scaler was reduced to compensate for expected increased uptime, and now it grants 20% increased ability damage to combatants per stack, down from 30%, and melee damage bonus is reduced when Peregrine Greaves, 1-2 Punch, Wormguard Caress, or Syntheseps perks are also active. And so Bungie had intended to manage the strength of those combinations, but according to them, the only reason that Roaring Flames and Syntheseps were so strong is because the fix that they'd implemented was bugged. So give us your thoughts about that down below. Also in the patch notes though, Bungie had said that Artifice Armor's additional slot had been fixed and reintroduced on armor pieces, but players have reported the fact that they're still missing on those particular armor pieces. And one of the folks on the Bungie help forum said, the hotfix resolved issues for the armor drops that come from the dungeon so that it doesn't happen moving forward, but the fix to resolve armor already acquired is still being investigated. And so new drops of armor pieces should have all of the appropriate mod slots, but existing ones still currently don't have that implemented, although they're saying they're looking to get that fixed. So we'll simply have to wait and see. However, if you want to check out the rest of the patch notes from yesterday, that'll also be linked in the description box below. Next though, some interesting seasonal gameplay stuff and confirmations from Bungie. And an interesting one to take note of is that players asked if the new dungeon exotic sword is farmable, and of course they're referring to the Heart Shadow exotic. Based on the repeat farm drop rate, players have assumed that no, it is not farmable. And Liana Rupert from Bungie confirmed only the legendary gear is farmable, which is what they'd previously confirmed in TWAP back in April. And she clarifies, players are asking if the exotic is farmable, the answer is no. And so those drop chances for the exotic are once per week per character. Of course, we can still get the increased drop rate via some of the triumphs, but otherwise it appears to be the only piece of loot that essentially has a weekly lockout like normal. And so good to have that confirmation. She also clarified at the same time that Bungie had outlined that Vault of Glass Spoils of Conquest will no longer be repeat farmable on encounter clears. Some players were asking why that isn't a thing, but it's worth that heads up that Bungie had notified us about that a little while back. Up next though, we get a bit of an early tease, or a first mention, of an upcoming unannounced Destiny project. And the GamePost.com covered this in an article, stating the unannounced Destiny project in development is codenamed Goliath, according to some job listings. And this very much looks like it's the codename for an expansion for Destiny. And Destiny Bulletin on Twitter pointed out that Stardust was the codename for Beyond Light, Nova the codename for Witch Queen. And from what we know, Nebula is the codename for Lightfall, which will be the next expansion. And the one following that, potentially, is Goliath, that they refer to right here, which as far as we know right now will be the final Shape expansion. And so Bungie are looking for a principal producer for Goliath, and in their own words they say, someone who will foster an understanding of Goliath goals and vision across multiple teams, and to work with the Goliath leadership team and other producers to help define and deliver on the roadmap of future Destiny releases. And so a lot of it is to do with budgeting and managing the various teams that will develop that content. It's also interesting that they speak about delivering on the roadmap of future Destiny releases. Of course, if this is in the final shape timeline, that again is a further suggestion that Bungie currently plan to continue developing Destiny content well into the future. And so it's an interesting one that I thought was worth pointing out. Give us any of your thoughts on the roadmap for the future that we know of, at least in terms of Lightfall and the final shape, and how you think Bungie could continue to develop Destiny content beyond that, whether we'll see a seasonal model or whether it's possible that they'll switch things up. As always, I'd be curious to get your thoughts down in the comments section. Up next, something very cool I wanted to share with you guys, but Numskull recently sent me one of their brand new Savathûn statues. Of course, this commemorates the release of Witch Queen, and these are going to be sold via the Numskull store, but also the Bungie store and various other outlets. And it's a super cool statue, not least because of the awesome detail right there. I believe a lot of it is hand painted. But also, the scale of the thing is pretty insane as well. It's so big that it's got little stands to hold the wings up here. I believe it's something like 50 or 60 centimeters across, so certainly pretty sizable. I'm putting my hand in front of the camera right there. I do have fairly big hands, trying to be useful and show some scale. Not sure whether that really helps, but nonetheless, the new Numskull Savathûn statues are really, really cool. And no doubt a fairly serious collector's item. So big shout out to Numskull for sending this over. I'll link their website down below where you can check out more details on this one. And the final mention for today, back to gameplay stuff, but from some commentary from developers over the course of the weekend, it looks like we essentially got a confirmation that Twilight Garrison, the aerial maneuverability exotic for Titans in D1, is not likely to return to Destiny 2. And so on the subject of Icarus Dash, movement and options for the Titans, Kevin Yanis from Bungie had said that Titans will never get air dodge back. It's now part of the Warlock identity, and he adds that I want to rip that band-aid off right now. However, in response to that, there was quite a bit of toxicity from inside of the community. As always, there was valid feedback about the possibility of seeing stuff like this in the game and folks' thoughts on whether it should return or not, but unfortunately, some folks definitely took things a little bit far over the course of the weekend, and it's something a lot of people in the community have spoken about, as players were attacking developers over the conversation, which, as a lot of us will know in the long term, isn't really going to do us any favors, as it's just going to reduce the amount of transparency that Bungie have with the community. And for a lot of these developers, they aren't necessarily in their work time tweeting their stuff, right? It's not necessarily part of their job to communicate through platforms like Twitter. So it's a form of transparency that definitely is a shame to lose, and unfortunately, some of those Bungie folks have said they're no longer going to communicate through those channels, which is definitely a shame. And so on the most part, I think we should definitely try to do better than that as a community, but we should also be aware that it is a minority of people who are willing to engage in that level of toxicity, right? So feel free to share your thoughts on that down below as always. But otherwise for today, that summarizes the conversation in this video. And as always, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you have, a rating down below really does help us out, and feel free to share your thoughts on any of the things we've spoken about down in the comments section. But otherwise for now, I appreciate you tuning in. As always, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.